And now it's
Alright,
time for the and now it's time for the big event, Planetside
No, I
2.
wanted Bishop in here. God damn it!
I figured you'd want him in here.
That's why
Unfortunate.
I was going to comment about the lore thing you mentioned. It has been shown in the campaigns.
I think Bishop is still in chat, so you have a chance to say something. I think Bishop is watching in chat, and it was very nice for Bishop to come here. It was an honor, honestly. It really was.
So the thing about he mentioned about torturing the soldiers and whatnot, it was I remember on the Osher campaign, the most I believe chapter 2, where you go directly into the tower. You find a dying soldier, right, and you take the codex from him, and the soldier actually dies because his nanite stopped working, which is what he mentioned about them trying to end the war about shutting down the nanites. And you hand over that technology over to your leader. Uh, so to keep that in mind, we might get more of those in the future. Then there's also the part with the captive soldiers going into some really traumatic stuff. It was also explored with the traitor, because not only was he overlord and persecuted for some years, which is, if you remember at the start of the campaign, it's the guy you have to track down. Afterwards, you capture where he would respawn, and you force him into the body of an NSO.
That doesn't sound nearly as creepy as seeing those twos from Planetside 1.
Oh yeah, and then after that, you get him killed again, and then you hand them over where he will respawn over to the nanite system for them to keep torturing him. So closest thing we got.
Oh, now it's time to talk about Planetside 2.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we did in
Sorry.
Planetside 1, we're going to start in chronological order. Like in Planetside 1, we're going to talk about the first release. And I don't know how many people we have in chat or on our VC that can talk about the origins of Planetside 2. But here we go.
I'm gonna hand
Sarlo,
over to
Mike,
the
and
others,
Orbi.
and I believe Mike and the others are a lot more
Yes.
knowledge on the start. I'll come
No
back to the
problem.
middle part, I guess.
So Mike, Sarlo, and Orbi, if you guys want to come in and talk to us about Planetside 2 and its beginnings, this is your chance. Just click on the hand icon and just request to speak. This is going to be very interesting. Okay, here we go. Invite to speak. Welcome to the show, Orbi. Good to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Hello there. Doing good. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you fine, Orbi. Planetside 2. Most of the fan base we have is Planetside 2, and I'm just pulling up some of the photos of Planetside 2 back in its heyday. There's some alpha gameplay, and even just this one screenshot, it's fair to say that the graphics for Planetside 2 definitely was much different in the original release.
Oh yeah, definitely. The game, like Bishop said in the beginning, the game was completely different when it first came out. It was gorgeous. I remember seeing the first images of the gameplay, and it was ahead of its time by at least 5 years when it came out. I feel like that was one of the biggest mistakes of the game when it came out, because nobody could run it.
I don't know if you guys ever heard of Angry Joe, but he played the game back in its original release in 2012, and it's very interesting to see how different the game was back then. I'm gonna quickly pull it up for you guys as reference. But he basically talked about what the game was like back in its heyday. So let's get to the footage in a bit here. But Orbi, when did you first start playing Planetside 2 from your experience? And Sarlo and Mike, you guys are welcome to chime in here. I'm willing to hear your stories and how you started playing this game. So Orbi, you got the floor.
I mean, at this point, I guess we can all just talk at the same time here and sort of share how we started. I started playing. I missed Planetside 1, but I started playing Planetside 2 in the beta. Actually, I heard about the game, watched the trailers, and I was following the hype train when it first started being announced, and I actually asked the devs for a beta key on Twitter. I created my Twitter account to ask them a beta key, and I still have the message on my Twitter from like the community manager at the time. I think it was Margaret Crum, and she sent me a beta key at the time to play the game, and I downloaded it on my mom's laptop, and I kept getting a G5 error, and I didn't know what to do, and the game would not run on the laptop because it was a very bad laptop. And I bought my first computer to play Planetside 2 on the beta. So for me, it was really like one of the first multiplayer social experiences that I had, was to come around and play Planetside 2. It was a pretty big deal for me at the time. And I mean, talking about it today, it sounds crazy to me. It's been 10 years already. It's like, it's insane.
You know what's interesting to point out, Orby? We'll get Sarlo and Mike here in a moment, but I'm going back to Angry Joe's video just to give you guys a few examples to how different the game was. I did not play this game back in its original release, but if you're watching my screen right now, one thing I can tell you is that the UI was more or less different back in the day. So the placement of the bases on the left side of the screen were a little different. But one of the biggest things that stand out that I can show you right now is the login screen was completely different. The description, everything was completely different. And another interesting thing I want to show you that I noticed is, does anybody here remember Station Cache? This was the microtransactions that this game had back in release.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was like the Sony cache. And then it changed when we changed to Daybreak. It was like their premium coin, and when Daybreak bought it, they just switched it over to Daybreak cache.
And the maps were very different, as you can see in this little still shot right here. I can only imagine how the battle for territory existed back then. And everything looks...
The one that I remember the most about that I kind of got shocked when I re-logged in and I saw they changed was the old Quartz Ridge. I remember old Quartz Ridge was like an open base, didn't have like the walls and that sort of stuff, so armor could park all around it and shell the base from the side mountains. And then they changed Quartz Ridge to be like this sort of fortress base because of the amount of complaints they got of people just shooting hash inside the capture points. It was very, very different at the time.
And let's bring out the other people on the show here. Thank you so much for being patient. Let's start off introducing Mike Z onto the show. So you are a fellow SKL member you're a fellow VS member for the outfit SKL. Sorry, I'm a little nervous right now. How are you doing today, Mike?
Fantastic. Hopefully you can hear me all right.
Oh, you're fine. You know what? Let's tune up Mike Z to a 200% so that you can hear his voice nice and clear. So, Mike Z, let's start off at the beginning with you. When did you first start playing this game, and what were your memories?
So I soloed the game for quite some time. I was bored of Battlefield and looking to get into something different. 2142 had shut down at some point. One of my favorite games of all time, where I started PC gaming. And Planetside 2 kind of appealed because it had similar settings, futuristic sci-fi type setting. Anyway, floated around. Played off and on for, I'd say, a solid 6 years. And bounced between a few games, but always would stay kind of like in, and didn't really touch outfits until I would say about 2-3 years ago. And it's funny you mentioned VS. There's a couple people in here and a couple people possibly in the chat that would say otherwise of where I've come from. I've been on all three at some point, but definitely solid VS player right now.
While you're talking, I'm just playing some random videos that Sarlo sent me on what the game looked like back in 2014. I don't think there's a lot of 2012 footage going around. That's why I pulled up Angry Joe's review, because that goes all the way back to 2012. And the UI, like I said earlier, most of the game looks more or less the same. The graphics were definitely different back then, but everything looks more or less the same. The placement where the certain exp were definitely very different. But other than that, there's nothing much else I can add unless you guys have something else to add onto it. And
yeah, some of my favorite videos whenever I want to, take the trip down memory lane were the videos from Total Biscuit. I remember when the game first came out, Total Biscuit was all over it. He even casted one of the big events at the time, and he had the critics videos talking about Planetside 2, and he played it a lot. And I always go over his videos whenever I want to see, remember how the game looked like at the time. And yeah, it looked pretty different, but it's one of those things where, like I said, the game when it came out was way, way ahead of its time, and it was unsustainable. People were going away because they couldn't keep up with the graphics. And it's sad looking back now that they had to downgrade everything, but it was necessary to keep up the performance because I remember jumping into fights and my computer just kind of shutting down because it couldn't keep up.
what the other thing I just noticed now is how different the loading screens were. Honestly, this looks much more interesting than one we have right now. Or maybe I don't know too much about this game's history. What a big difference.
I feel like I'm not sure exactly when, but I think it's around when Hossin came out. They switched many of the loading screens backgrounds to what we have now, and they never put the old ones back in. And I also miss, some of those old screenshots like that one of the Azimir bridge that we have there on the loading screen. They never came back, so.
2014 on a biolab. Everything looked different. There's a lot more colors.
Biolabs were amazing. Biolabs were one of the best looking bases in the game, and that's one of the things, right? The shields on the sides, like whenever it came out, like Bishop said, it was all ray tracing. It had like a bunch of lighting effects and particles, and the physics were all different as well. So big fights on biolabs, you could get like 10 frames or something like that if your PC was not like a big machine, And at the time, we still didn't have such a widespread gaming community. People still were running stuff on, on their mom's computers or stuff like that. So it wasn't everyone that could have a rig to run Planetside 2, so.
Look at the detail of this one player in particular. I don't know what graphics setting Sarlo got it set, but you can see so much more detail here, and I can understand why they had to downgrade the graphics a bit. I can see a lot of detail on the uniform that this player has. I think Sarlo is gonna step. So speaking of Sarlo, I'm gonna have Sarlo step up here next. So Sarlo, I appreciate being patient. Let's welcome Sarlo onto the show. How are you doing today?
It's a wonderful show. I'm all ears. Listening about Planetside 1 was really fascinating. I never got the chance to play it, and now we're kind of bridging the transition to Planetside 2. And
yes,
when you put things in context from Planetside 1, a lot of the things which we experienced make a lot more sense now. Yes.
And I'm repeating myself too much at this point, but I have to say once again, I'm glad Bishop was able to summarize the Planetside 1 experience as best as he could with the time that he had. I just want to say thank you once again for Bishop for doing that. And I made the right decision to not interrupt too much because I think we got a lot of insightful information because of that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
But I will say this regarding the graphics of Planetside.
Let's get to that. We'll get to that, Sarlo. But I want to know more about when did you first start playing this game? What are your memories when you first started out?
It was one day after release in 2012. I dropped down with a drop pod in the middle of an amp station because that's how you did it back in the day, and got ran over by a tank. Games have tutorials, but back in the olden days, I didn't need a tutorial to learn that my bullets and grenades can't harm tanks. Because the tank ran me over. That's how we learned back in the day. Kids, they just do not understand. Yes, I remember showing the game to my friends. They told me there is no way this is staying free. Such a incredible experience. Lo and behold, here we are. It was very interesting because of all the media and all the hype around it. There was really nothing like it. And to be frank, there really is nothing like it.
Yep.
I think I got a great shot of the biolabs right here. Look how much glass there is on the biolab right there. Look how much glass there is. Are you seeing what I'm seeing right now?
I believe.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like a shield dome or something like that, and it had like the sort of the same effects that the warp gates had, and you could see through, like you could see things flying outside and blowing up through the shields. I think that was part of like why it was so hard to maintain, because the aircraft flying around could see everyone inside, and they could see them outside as well. It was just a massive. Just processing stress there.
Actually, Orbi, I think it's even bigger because if you recall, some of the larger biolabs actually had buildings directly below them and objectives for players to
Oh
follow.
yeah, yeah.
So you not only had to combine the biolab itself and all the air around it and all the infantry around it, but everything happening underneath. And you can
True.
see a move away from this methodology with containment sites. I know I'm skipping a little bit, but containment sites are pretty much rendered separately. So that's proof of the immense pressure the game was under.
Yep.
Another thing I want to bring up is when you got killed, you don't know where the player was that killed you. I'm just a bit. I have mixed feelings to why that was changed. As you can see in this video right here, when you get killed. Some people like it, some don't, but that's another difference I just wanted to point out.
That
Oh,
still
and-
happens, Enio. Don't worry.
The
Oh,
video in question,
yeah.
I believe, has the newer death screen, not the older one. But definitely, yes. I think it's a positive change because it helps to reduce frustration and educate. But then again, when you think how impatient people are with respawning, you just smash left button to respawn. It's not like you get a chance to see anyway.
Here's another little detail. What are these things called again? Does this still exist in the game, or this was a product of its time? Does anybody know what this
No,
is?
that's a particle from the shield regen for the medic. It just doesn't have the bubble anymore.
Oh, that. Let me guess. They had to take this away because of performance issues.
Yeah. Yep. Improving performance. The thing with Planetside was the way it felt, at least for me at the time, like the game built up this incredible hype. Like the game had this amazing idea, and there was nothing like it, and everybody was looking at Planetside. But then the game was just not performing well. People would drop by, and whenever they wanted to be in a big fight, they just couldn't. Like it was unplayable for a lot of people. So after the launch, I feel like the dev team spent like a good few years on just trying to put the game in a playable state. Because it launched way ahead of its time. The hardware at the time just could not keep up with it.
Now, interesting how you mentioned hardware, because Sarlo's footage he provided me, in this one battle here, average FPS was around 20 in 2014.
Yeah.
An old GT 430, I believe.
God damn.
FPS 25. FPS at 25. Oof.
Well,
Yeah, I mean-
recall, Orbi, that soon after it came out, they dedicated an entire update cycle to something called OMFG, Operation Make Faster Game, and it became
Yeah.
a public priority for them.
Yep. Yeah. They were really like putting all their people on that at the time, I feel like. And it's hard to say if it paid up in the long run, because the hardware did catch up in a few years later, but and that's kind of why now people ask for stuff to come back, and we also have some things that have made their way back to the game, like some of the old shields are coming back to the game that look much better, and they're putting in a few better looking stuff back into the game, but at the time it was just unsustainable.
And I just pulled up a footage what the biolabs look like back in 2014.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, bro.
There are a lot more.
Observing the footage Enio pulled up, the footage also raises another very important characteristic. I want you to notice that all the other characters in the sunlight are not exactly visible. Neither is the game fast moving, it's not fast paced. With these additional graphics effect and the lower FPS, the game and gameplay moved at a much slower pace. And with time, as performance got better, as the players became more adept, as some groups found less enjoyment in the old casual play style, the game sped up. So Planetside, by its nature, is somewhat different today than it was back in the day, partially thanks to the different mentality that a clearer, faster moving picture provides to the players. Think, for example, a comparison between, say, Counter-Strike and something like, what's a slow FPS? Crysis, for example. Crysis 3, very slow, high on graphics, even though you could run through it, you don't. CSGO, it's all about movement and speed and accuracy. And this change affected Planetside just as well.
And another person that commented on chat made up a very good point. There's that old meme. Hold on a second. Nope. Whoops. There's that old meme. Can you run Crysis? I'm surprised nobody mentioned Planetside too much. This game really did not get that much marketing. Did Planetside 1 get even that much marketing, or was it more or less the same as the sequel? That's another very good question. Because
I don't know about Planetside 1, but I know that Planetside 2 got a lot of marketing. Like, this game had a lot of people looking at it whenever it first came out. And I feel like that's the reason why, to this day, the community that's stuck around, we still believe this game can succeed somehow. I feel like every one of us has this feeling that we just need this one breakthrough and the game's going to become mainstream again, and we're going to have a rise of people playing it, even though it's most likely a stupid dream. It's never going to happen, because whenever it first came out, there was an insane amount of people looking at this. I remember it being everywhere. All the big content creators at the time were talking about it, and people were playing it. It was on MLG, and there was talk about competitive play. But yeah, it just sort of died out due to a bunch of problems, both in development and Total Biscuit talks a lot about this on his critics about the game, that like a lot of the stuff that came out was unfinished, and it's mostly due to the game just having bad performance. Which is completely understandable, right? That it's still something so unique on a technological level that I simply don't understand how this game still runs. You have like 1,000 players in the same battlefield all fighting at once, and there's no loading screens between one battle and the other. There's no matchmaking. Technologically speaking, it's still insane that they managed to do this 10 years ago, and so far nobody did anything similar. So
I'm gonna say this right now. I don't know a lot of the game's history. I joined in around 2019, and I can't say too much about the previous history back in 2014, 2015. But would it be fair to say that this game engine is more or less being held by duct tape at this point, because it seems very difficult to optimize?
Oh, absolutely. The engine for Planetside is Forge Light, I think, and it's an in-house engine from Sony Online. Like, they developed the engine in house. So the people that kind of made the engine were lost with the time, right? Especially during the H1Z1 period, where Daybreak, Daybreak bought Sony Online, and then most of the people that knew how to work the engine were moved to other projects. Then after that, likely terminated, and they were not in the team anymore. So the people that know how to work the engine are not around, and they're probably never coming back. So I feel like inside the dev team they probably have this sort of stuff where they're trying to piece it together with the knowledge that they have left, but nobody really knows what's in there. It's sort of like this black box where they touch something and they try to change something here and there, but nobody really knows what's really in the engine, because most of the people that made it are not around anymore, and it's a very niche engine. Like, there's not a lot of people that know about it, that know how it works. It's not something like the Unreal engines, or these things that we have nowadays that are very open, and everybody pretty much knows how to work those things. And so that's where these spaghetti codes sort of comes from.
Another thing I want to add into this bit is the graphics downgrade. Look at the effects on this Mosquito engine, for example. See all the glowing parts in the engines on the back.
Yeah.
I don't think that's not. I believe that's no longer in the game.
Well,
That's no longer in the game.
And whatnot.
That effect is no longer in the game. I don't think I've ever seen it happen when I joined 2019. That got downgraded, I think.
So I I'm not 100% on this, and I don't want to say anything too bad in here, but I'm pretty sure they added something like that back as a paid cosmetic.
Nevertheless, I can see that the textures and the graphics overall definitely had more detail back then, and then the downgrade eventually happened. My theory is when the PlayStation port came in, yeah, there's a PlayStation port for this game. When that came around, I guess they had to make some sacrifices. That's my theory.
Yeah, that too. I can't, I feel bad for the PlayStation 4 community, because there's a lot of dedicated people in there and they love the game just as much as us. But from a company perspective, I feel like the PS4 port was probably the worst thing that Sony could have ever done. Like, it stifled the development like nothing else in this game, I feel like. Like I said, it's good they did it, and it's great that we have a lot of people in there that love the game just as much as us. But from a development perspective, they got stuck with this, side project that just drained resources. So yeah, it's just a bit of a mess there.
Let's talk about this game's history. We're gonna focus on the ones that I think that stood out the most, whether it was positive or negative. Now, let's focus on the positives first. When the game first started in 2012, I think what we can fairly say is the graphics definitely was one of the things that stood out. The large-scale battles was another thing. But I want to hear what you guys personally think. I know Sarko was around 2014, so let's start off with you, and the rest of you guys can chime in. What are the positives things that you can remember from the early days of this game?
Well, that's a very good question now. Let me tell you something. Planetside has something that the other games generally don't, which is an express route into a community. Think about it for a second. Back in the day, of course, you had servers, and each server had a TeamSpeak, and you had to meet people one by one. But in Planetside, with a click of a button, you found yourself in a platoon of 48 people who are screaming in your ear, and no other game does that. So it is like an instant social experience.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, I remember first joining the game and dropping into a squad and just hearing people yelling like crazy and not understanding what was going on whatsoever. because this game just has like a completely different social aspect to it. I even feel like no other MMO gives this same sort of team play exercise that Planetside does. It really is a social experience. You drop by and everybody's just yelling, and the platoon play, the squad play experience in Planetside is just completely out of the box. It's like nothing else.
I'm playing the footage
Yeah.
right now, and that seems to go pretty well. Go ahead.
Yeah, on that point, I remember like the first thing I came in, I joined the squad, right? And the first thing they told me is, "You're a medic. Throw those resonates at the maxes and pick them up." And then the max tells me in the voice chat, "Dude, upgrade your med tool so you can get people faster." And they walk me through how to do that, even though I was like, less than BR10 at the time.
Orby, what do you got? Orby, what do you think are the positives that you noticed back when you first started? What really stood out? What really stood out to you in the previous history of this game?
Yeah, I mean the community aspect, like I said, I think Sorrow.
Oh, sorry, I already answered the question already. Who else did not answer? Did Mike already answer the question? Did Mike answer the question?
No, I did not.
Okay, Mike, this is your chance to speak. Sorry, I did not get your DM. Should I open it up for the stream to see?
You can open it up. I've got nothing to hide.
Thank you for bringing these photos here. Let's look at these, shall we? So, while we're looking at the pictures, Mike, when you first started playing this game, when did you first start playing the game, Mike?
I started playing around 2012, 2013, like I said, off and on, doing solo stuff. So I didn't really touch communities. I was attracted to the game by its graphics. I think I've had 2 new PCs in the last 10 years. So every time I got one, I used this game as a benchmark. So some of these are just screenshots of just moments in time. Just the game looked freaking awesome. So played TR, played NC. I never really played VS up until recently. So these are some old ones for sure. I think if you hit open original, it blows it up even more.
Oh, yeah. If you open up original, it definitely blows up more. And let's pull up 2014 because that is the most interesting. I don't think this exists in the live game right now. Hold on a second. Let me pull out that right now. Very interesting. There's more green. There's more green in the skybox. And this is Indar, I think.
Yeah, you're looking at the crown. Yeah, that's crown and Tialo is on your left.
Back in 2020, I believe this was back in 2014, I think. No, 2013. Correction, 2013.
I don't see the land bridge.
It wasn't. I don't think it existed at the time, but it's interesting how.
It wasn't there. Yeah.
And look at the details on the gun. There's a lot more detail, and I think that got downgraded at some point, if I am not mistaken.
Talking about the downgrade, I do remember somebody said that the Planetside game runs on about 5 to 6 layers at most. Like, it's incredibly optimized.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I know that the game at this point is pretty smooth. Like they've done like years of work to try to get it to where it is now. But at that time, on that last picture, that you had of the crown there, I don't think the gun had any downgrades on detailing. I think what they messed up with a lot is specifically the lighting that you see there. That's what we don't have anymore. The way the lightning reacted to the environment and to yourself, that's the sort of stuff we don't have anymore.
I have to agree with that. Unless you have a photo like this to compare with the live game, it's very hard to tell. I definitely see a lot more detail. Definitely a lot more detail. And I can see the downgrade that they did when the PlayStation port arrived. I think it was 2014 or 2015 from my memory, that when it first came out.
You know what? Let me see if I can get the same angle. Indoor is currently opening game, and I'm heading over.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, now let's Now, let's move on to the negative. Oh boy, and I bet some of you in this community have quite a bit to say. Now, when you first
The
started
10 frame per second. There we go.
when you first started playing the game, and it slowly went things over time, I heard a lot of stories on what were removed from the game as time went on. So, Sala, let's start off with you, the negatives. And I bet there's quite a bunch that stood out over the years.
Hmm.
What
Well,
do
you
you
see,
think?
no.
What do you think stands out for you, Sarlo?
I do love Planetside, not a lot of negatives on my part. So you will recall that in the terms of the graphics department, there was something called NVIDIA Physics, a new physics effect that was very experimental. It never got properly implemented, but we've already covered graphics, so let's skip
Yes.
that part. Regarding things that can be missed, you will recall that Nexus Battle Islands were one thing that got teased and never delivered. Essentially, small battlefields where two platoons could duke it out, and only now we are seeing them be reintroduced for outfit wars. Now, I want you to think you have this giant game with an open map and completely unstructured combat, where players sometimes get a subpar experience because of the free nature of the combat. So imagine if you had built in a system for curated short-term matches, a matchmaking system for squads and platoons. What effect would this make on player satisfaction, especially during low pop hours? Instead of going to cold tier or an unstable continent and complaining there are no good spawns, a player could participate in a 12v12 game of team deathmatch and perhaps be satisfied, and then, in a moment's notice, switch back to regular Planetside. Would it decrease pop? Would it make things more stable? The possibilities are endless, the answers are none, but I do miss the potential.
Anybody else want to chime in on the negatives that you remember back in the day that stood
Sarmo
out?
is kicking in all the bangers. Goddamn.
What? So, Mike and Orby, do you guys want to chime in on some of the negatives that you personally thought of this game back in the day and what stood out?
Uh, for me, it was learning curve. Just there was a lot to pick up on, and that could be because I didn't touch community for some time, and then it seems like I was on West Coast servers as much as East Coast servers. I just couldn't get the times right for like population. Biggest problem that I've had with this game is just population. Like we all think the game deserves more of an audience than it currently has.
Does
Yeah,
anybody here remember Combat Initiative? I heard a bit of controversy about that around the community. Does anybody
Yes,
know what was that about?
if I recall that, and I only know this because I've always driven a Vanguard when I was playing at sea. Um, Before this update or after this update, I can't recall which one was which. A Liberator pilot could come in with a tank buster and be rewarded if he was sneaky and completely tank bust a, MBT and skate away. Now with the Combat Initiative update, it kind of not only the Liberator, but it did everything. It nerfed everything, and we have the game that we like today, which is a lot more balanced. But there's some aspects that I would like to see come back. Um, Rewarding some of the pilots was, nice to see. There's a couple characteristics with the tanks that I would have liked to have seen come back, like some of its abilities and you know resistances it used to have. There was a bunch of stuff. I didn't really keep too much tabs on it, and there's probably a bunch of people in the community that have more data and are more well versed than I am in it. But that's just one specific example I can remember because I always remember getting swooped in by a liberator and insta dying in my tank because they were hitting you in the back, but they were rewarded for doing that before this update.
yeah. The genuinely like and just to take a step back into the last question. I feel like this is sort of where my biggest issue with Planetside has always been. I think it's just the development direction that the game took a bunch of times, and I feel like throughout its entire history, the game always had this problem of the developers not being able to walk their own legs, sort of speaking, because there was a lot of stuff being told to them, from the people higher up, or changes being done to the teams, where the game was just stifled because development was not in the right place, or people higher up wanted something different than what the dev team wanted, and things were just not lining up. I remember the Combined Arms Initiative when it first came out. It had a very, very good theory behind it. Like what they wanted to achieve was really good because they basically wanted to make vehicles and infantry have sort of the same value. They wanted to make a tank be as effective as infantry and aircraft as well. But the way it was implemented was, completely flawed in the end of the day, and they never changed it back, and it sort of stayed around as a balance change to vehicles that was more detrimental to the vehicle player than they wanted it to be. Yeah, I feel like to me that has always been the issue with Planetside. It's like just a bunch of development decisions that ended up leading to a game not fulfilling its full potential. I feel like everyone that still plays Planetside sort of has a little bit of this feeling that this game always had this unlimited potential. It's something great like nothing else, and was never fulfilled because of development decisions, of things that got stuck in development, or never came out of development, or never even went into development. And because of that, the game just kind of, slowed down to the point where it is today.
I think another thing I want to bring up is these bases, these resources. Are you seeing the video that I have? I don't think, does this still exist in the game nowadays? Because there's these resources called aerospace, mechanized, and infantry.
Oh no, that's the different nanites. That was one of the nice stuff from way back when. There were two things that I missed. One of those are those nanites, where you had separate resources for each one of the sort of stuff that you could buy. Infantry equipment, aircraft, and tanks. They all had different resources. And the other one, I'm not sure if you can find a screenshot, but the other thing that I missed a lot today was the multiple join action options. Like back then you had different join action options. Like today you just press J and you drop into one place. Back when you used to have up to, I believe it was like up to 3 different options for your join action, and they would show up on the left side of your screen like as little hotspots. And I miss those like dearly. I think those were a fantastic way to move people around the map without needing, to redo the spawn system.
Speaking of updates, you kind of talked about that a little bit. That was one of the things what's one of the things that the game kind of struggled with. And I think would it be fair to say that the major update this game had ever since first release, they were more or less too far in between. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, when the game first came out, I feel that was a problem with the development cycle, right? When the game first came out, it came out unfinished. There was a lot of stuff that they had to fix after the game came out. If you look into the critics at the time, that's what everybody was saying. Like there was a lot of stuff that had to be done before they launched it, and after it came out, they kind of went into this, repair mode where they had to fix a bunch of stuff and try to put the game into a better state to try to stabilize everything. So it stayed like that for a while. But the team was still, pretty big, and they were still, they still had all the resources. So the updates were still coming. You know, we had a new continent, we had other stuff added into the game, and then it kind of went into a drought, right? That we had for the longest time, especially in the Daybreak era where everybody was taking off of Planetside and put into H1Z1. That time was just development hell. We didn't have anything being worked on in Planetside. The development team was down to a handful of people, less than a handful of people, and things were being worked on. And development team, this is one of the things I think about Planetside the most. Is like development team is always punching above their pay grade, right? You have a development team of 5 people, and they're still doing something that's way beyond what 5 people could be able to do. So that has always been nice, but still you can only do so much with that sort of development power. And then you have the Rogue Planet Games era, which completely turned it into overdrive, and now you have an actual functional development team. And it's insane the consistency of updates that we've been having since Rogue Planet Games. Like, people understate that. Like, what we've been having now is a functional service game. Like, before Rogue Planet Games and before the escalation update, I remember thinking that the largest update would get, in the year would be the end of the year anniversary bundle with a few, new reskins for weapons, and that was the largest update in the year. And now we have an entire roadmap with a bunch of stuff on it. So we definitely had a bunch of rough years in there, but after Rogue Planet Games, it just turned into a completely different service. You may not like all the updates. They can't please everybody. I know a lot of people hate Bastions, a lot of people hate Osher, a lot of people hate NSO, but from a development perspective, it's just a completely different beast. Now, Enio, I need to cut you off here real quick because I do need to go. I need to go get my wife in college. I'm sorry I can't stay for any longer, but this has been a fantastic stream. And I hope to catch you up later on, see what else is going on, right?
No problem, Orby. I appreciate you taking your time, and I hope you liked Bishop's little show that he did for at least an hour.
Definitely. It was amazing, bro. Like, I wish I could have talked more and stayed more as well. But just Bishop talked, he was so nice about Planetside 1. And just hearing about the stories about, the community stuff that they did in Planetside 2 was just amazing. So definitely a great time there. I appreciate it, bro.
That's what, yeah, again, I just want to say thank you for coming in, Orby. And I'm glad that Bishop had his chance to shine, because I can easily tell that he was so passionate about Planetside 1. He knew all the details, and that's something that needs to happen more often whenever doing something like this. Let the guests speak, because sometimes some interesting information comes up when you let them think. I love that.
Yeah, and it's it's one of those things where it's so hidden. You would never hear about it, and like you said, you can tell the passion in his voice. The great time that he had with his friends and that sort of community. And it's just amazing to hear that sort of stuff from the people that predated us in this amazing game that we play now. So I appreciate him and appreciate you, Enio, for putting this up. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.
No problem, Orby. And again, thank you so much for coming in. And I might as well quick a little ad here. If you guys ever wish to support the show, you are more than welcome to do so with the merch store I have, Twitch sub, Patreon, however you wish to support the show. And trust me, anything you wish to contribute will go a long way. Just want to say this once for this entire stream right here. So again, thank you so much for coming in, Orby. I appreciate you taking your time.
It,
thank you so much, Orby.
Guys. Catch you on the next one.
Pleasure, Orby, as always.
Thank
Please
you.
stop by for tea sometime. Oh, he's gone now. She'll never hear how much I appreciate him and wish to converse with him. Oh, I will never convey it to him. Oh, goodness, no.
I was gonna make a cheesy joke to Orby by saying, "Do you need a bag?" I was gonna do a follow up to that, but he's not here, so I'm not gonna do that. So Sarlo, did
Yes.
you already answer the question, or so Dex, Sarlo, and Mike, do you recall about your negative experiences about this game? That what could be better, more or less? Because that's one thing we could definitely elaborate a little bit more on.
Sure, Sarlo, you can go.
Well,
Or
what
Mike.
is there to say? I mean, Orby covered all the bases. The fact of the matter is that when the game came out originally, there was a quite severe content drought, even within what was already available. You could only do so many same nights without proper goals to follow or new activities for so long. And I believe that was a state for about a year or so. Well, in any case, yeah, that's all I got on this one. It's a very subjective
Right.
topic, and in hindsight, we know what could have worked and what not. But then
Mm-hmm.
again, the gaming market also changed in the
Mm-hmm.
last 10 years quite a bit.
I do have something regarding that one, but first, mentioning the old Planetside, I do remember playing it for like some weeks before my computer died. Like, you remember I played it around probably 2.14 or 2.15, around the time the Combined Arms update happened. And I do remember, like, being completely new, right? Completely overwhelmed about everything, and at the time, I was completely terrible at shooters. The reason I joined Planetside was because of I was looking for a shooter that had no matchmaking, where I could go and practice by myself, right? I tried some of the single player games and failed miserably at it. And I was like, well, an online player would work, like with people helping me and whatnot, right? So I ended up looking at the Steam free games and I ended up finding this one. When I stumbled here, as I mentioned earlier, learning how to be a medic from people just straight up telling me in the voice chat. Um, and being at odds because they were like, no, 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 you throw the nade and then you dump into the room so that when you get shut down, you would get rest by your own grenade. And I was like, you know what, fine, I'll do it. And it works, right? For reference, you could also revive, at that time, maxes with medics rest nades.
You brought up something that I forgot to ask Bishop earlier: the bugs and glitches. The bugs and glitches. I don't know if Bishop. I think Bishop talked about it briefly. I don't know if Bishop talked about it briefly in Planetside 1, but there certainly have been some interesting bugs and glitches that I remember in Planetside 2, especially. So you remember those Spitfire AI turrets that you can spawn? Well, I remember on one update they were glitched to the point where you can spawn an infinite number of them. That's one I remember the most. Jokingly, we could have a Spitfire division for all of things.
Oh, the golden days.
What comes into mind when it comes to bugs and glitches? When it comes to Planetside 2 that you guys remember?
One more thing we did lose, I'm pretty sure people have mentioned it. NC Maxes used to have flamethrowers and a few other units as well, which is one of the weapons we lost, which is kind of sad. I mean, I get it, they cost lag and whatnot, but that's probably one of the things that's bad from that we've lost. Anybody else remembers any other weapons?
Say again?
Any other weapons that were lost during the downgrades?
That is a very good question. I was not around the early days.
I feel like Hesh got nerfed, but I guess for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, there's a TR flamethrower on the Flash?
Yeah,
Yeah.
TR has one.
Flamethrowers in Planetside. I
Yeah,
have to see
if
that.
So
you look-
have you ever had a chance to eat a creme brulee? It's essentially a custard in a small ceramic glass. And then the top is made of sugar and it's charred with a small blowtorch. Are you familiar with the concept?
I think so.
Yes, well, at some point, one of the developers might have asked themselves, wouldn't this delicious charred texture of the top of the caramelized creme brulee also fit the whole Inovanu's spandex, because the spandex insulates from heat, damage, blaster fire, explosions, repairs itself quite well, actually. It's a fantastic armor with a hole for the face. And if you burn the face with a flash flamethrower, you pretty much shut down the entire user and provide a burning sensation. It really is an all-in-one solution for committing what essentially might be war crimes on the Vanu. So it's a no-brainer that it got added later on, and it's very unfortunate that other factions did not get access to it as well. But hopefully in the future, perhaps a flamethrower pistol, a melee weapon. Oh, the possibilities are endless, really.
I mean, we have a blowtorch recently.
Yes, but of course, you see, the progress is being made, yet albeit too slow. I hope Chris is listening well.
Yeah, I hope he gets to see the clip later.
You want to talk progress, Sarlo? How about we add an Ace Attorney aspect into this whole franchise, where we investigate, where Ace Attorney investigates war crimes on the TR, VS, and ENC, not just the Vanu.
You do realize that would kill my outfit. Demo Ops has destroyed a great many Colossi in its early days.
The bang bus.
The Vanguard, yes. But now, on the topic of interesting things that we had lost or changed, here's a very interesting thing that we had lost recently: recoil. And why don't you think about it for a second? Weapons in Planetside always felt somewhat floaty, which went along with the slower pace of combat. And that's why weapons were also very useful in more closed-door scenarios, controllable scenarios. But with the latest patch, I know I'm skipping a few timelines here, but with the latest patch, recoil is practically nullified. This brings Planetside more in line with other games like Battlefield or Call of Duty, where a faster, more accurate style of gameplay is, again, rewarded, and weapons that have a heavy bloom and medium ranges that would have otherwise hindered a player are no longer the norm as much as they were before. And it's a very interesting change that hasn't gotten as much attention as it deserves, really.
I'm just looking over at the guns that you mentioned on this video. So there was a T9 Carve, T16 Rhino, AMR-66, BW-16, T7 mini chain gun. I don't know how many of these guns are still in the game after all these years. These are just a few examples.
All of them. They all are. I can confirm that much. One interesting thing you mentioned, or you see on the video, is the Hailstorm. If memory serves correctly, the Hailstorm and the Armistice were the first two SMGs to be released. I believe the Hailstorm was sooner. Oh, I could be wrong. And when they came out, being the first weapons of their weapon type, they were all the rage. You know, today SMGs are just something somewhat forgettable. But back in the day, you know, if you had an SMG, you were with the cool kids.
More or less the same abilities that you still have back in 2014. Some things haven't changed. There's the scoreboard. That still is the same today. But definitely the UI placement, such as if you're capturing base, is very different. See, platoon waypoint updated is still the same. And a lot of the things are still the same. Though I have.
But you see the alert. In a couple of the screens, I tap and open the window of the alert. This was a biolab alert, where players won by holding biolabs across all 3 continents. Something which we have never seen since those times.
Oh, wait, so what we have now is the typical territory control, but back then you had different types of alerts where you control how many biolabs you have.
Exactly, facility control alerts that took place throughout different continents.
Yep, yeah, amp stations too, in tech plants.
Oh yes. I do remember digging a hole directly through enemy territory just to touch an NC or VS tech plant for that specific alert and hold it for all that is there, praying that the guys on the other continents can do the same. Something like that is unprecedented.
Another interesting detail I noticed, Sarlo, I got a question from the audience, is notice the region. It says enemies detected 48 plus. Nowadays, that's 96 plus. And a little detail.
Excellent observation, yes.
See, it's funny how the game considers 48 plus back then as, ooh, it's a lot of people. But nowadays, it's 96 plus. Interesting. And now, Evil Genius from the audience has a very good question. Multi-continent alerts. Does anybody here want to explain how those worked back in the day?
Be frank, what we said is all there is to it, really. Control AM stations throughout continents. And that was it. You had 9 AM stations for 3 for each continent, 3 times 3 is 9, and that was really all there was to it. After those were removed, they never return in the same way.
I have one thing to add to that. The command voice chat in-game, you were able to communicate with all the other squads and platoons on different continents. But ever since the game design changed, where the alert only happens on the continent you're currently in, there's no such thing as multi-continent alerts anymore. I think, if I remember correctly, I suggested on Reddit for the developers to change it where its command chat only works with communications with the current squads or platoons that are currently in the same continent you are in. The leader chat still goes through all the other continents, but at least the command voice chat was changed to localized continents that you're currently in, which is a very nice change. And I can see why you're able to do command voice chat with all the other platoons and squads back in the day because of these multi-continent alerts. Another interesting detail, what has changed?
For detail on this, that part of the feature still remains. If you see the text chat for command, it is multi-continent still. So
yeah, it still is.
I need reinforcement in that Quartz Ridge, right? People in Austin will be able to see it. So.
Yes. Welcome to the show, Air. We're finally moving on to Planetside 2. What we talked about earlier, for those of you that are just joining in, we already talked about Planetside 1, and Bishop summarized Planetside 1 in very good fashion in at least an hour. And I provide you guys some cool videos on that. So you can check this VOD out later for your own viewing pleasure. And I provided you guys a link or videos that you guys can check out those videos in your own time. Basically, yes?
Regarding the command chat, you can still actually hear the command chat of the other continent if you are leading a platoon and one of your squad leaders or a good portion of your squad is on that continent. If you're talking command chat, both of those continents will hear you.
Interesting.
I haven't encountered that so far.
And I got the perfect shot of the biolab in its old design. I don't know if that design is ever going to be brought back with the advancements of game engines we have nowadays. I don't think that's ever going to happen unless by pure miracle the Planetside franchise is going to move on to Unreal Engine 5 or something like that. That'd be very cool.
Excellent question. Perhaps not. Perhaps.
Let's hope not. I'd rather get back, the life on the world, like the extra vegetation, the extra light, the extra colors.
I do recall being able to taunt enemies in the old biolab because they'd be on the other side of the shield and you couldn't do anything to them, so you would teabag up and down and they'd do it back, and then someone would go in and stab them because you were distracting them. It was great.
I got a good question from the audience. He said, Air the One and Only says, I used to play PS2 while apart ADK. Are they still around? Is that an outfit? ADK, is that an outfit you're talking about,
it must
Air?
Be an outfit, but
yeah, I honestly don't know. It depends what server you're in. That's a very good question. It also depends what server you're in. Oh, a gaming community. I never heard of ADK.
We have certain tools to assess outfit activity, which we're going to use at this very moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's another detail I forgot to mention earlier. There's another detail. So going back to the Planetside 2 review that Angry Joe did back in 2012, there is another detail that I want to mention to you guys for those of you that are not familiar with this game. So the maps, as you can see here, were completely different back in the day. Very, very different territory control. So here's another detail that he mentioned. 6,000 players per server, 2,000 players per continent. That is still true today, is that right? Or was that changed? And
hard to tell because I think we peak at 2,000 players. I know a continent-wide alert starts at like I think it's either 750 or 800 players.
800.
Yeah.
Here's another detail. The server name. When you go into the character list in game right now, does it say Emerald or US East or US West? That's another thing I kind of noticed. Because the menu
Well, I
is
believe it
completely...
says both, but back in the day, we had multiple servers on US West.
Yeah, back then, Angry Joe showed this little lovely little character list, and it says US East. Nowadays, it's called Emerald. Another
Well,
interesting
I
detail.
guess this is a fantastic time to segue into the battle between Emerald and between Waterson and Matterson. Yes, the most well-known server merge in all of Planetside.
Continent cap is 900. That's different compared to what it was like back in the day from the sound of it.
Oh, yeah, 900 is the current limit, 800 is the alert time for it to automatically start. It was in one of the recent patch notes, if I remember correctly.
And Angry Joe displayed one of the glitches and bugs that this game had back in the day. That looks rough to look at.
Oh, that one still happens.
But not as much from the sound of it.
Goodness, I had seen this. Yes.
This is in 2012, by the way. History is repeating itself.
On Osher, if you go to one of the tridents and you go up to the ramps, there is a specific angle you can do on any of the ramps that does exactly that glitch. About all the other textures disappearing, and if you do it for long enough, your character will actually fall through the floor.
And there's no story, just the lore. That's another good point that was mentioned back in the day. And some gameplay footage. He did the game. If Angry Joe ever decides to play Planetside 2 again, I think he's aware of Planetside 2 right now, but I think he's moved on to other things. Premium membership, that's another interesting thing. Look at the prices for these things back in 2012. I wonder how much. If you guys want to check right now, look at the membership prices back then. And I think this is US dollars. For 1 month is $4.99, 3 months is $12.99, 6 months is $11.99, and 12 months is $9.99. So the total price is... I'm very curious. Is the price still the same? I have to check. I have to check this on this in game right now. Let me go to the Planetside 2 website.
It is quite the same up here. Yes.
It's still the same?
Yep.
Yes. However, due to inflation, you could argue that perhaps the value is now cheaper than it was before.
Look at these get better benefits over time the longer you are a member and more passive serve points. Are these still the same or was
No,
that changed?
Is different actually. Back then you had multiple tiers of subscription. I forgot how you ascended those tiers, but yes, the longer you were subscribed, the more benefits you got. And this is another interesting concept that differs between Planetside 1 and 2. You will recall when we mentioned that Planetside 1 was a subscription-based game. Hardcore subscription, yes?
Yeah, yes, I think I remember that, yes.
Yes, and you do recall that there are subscription-based games such as World of Warcraft that exist till this day. It's my little personal theory, and I have no source to verify this, that if you are monetarily invested into a subscription, you are... Well, you feel like you need to keep the subscription to keep access to your progress, and you don't want to lose your progress when you stop paying for a subscription. So you end up in this limbo where you do not wish to leave a game and stop tossing money at it because you've been so monetarily invested. And perhaps having a subscription model is what kept games like WoW and Planetside 1 even alive for so long. So it really... It raises a question which I had never answered. How would a subscription model change Planetside 2? Now, of course, it would mean less players that would play the game, that is certain. But what would it mean for player retention statistics? Would people who are invested monetarily since day one play for longer than someone who is not?
Again,
a mystery. We shall never know the answer.
That is a very good question, and I don't think I got an answer for you. I'm not a game designer, but but it's a given that all of us can tell if a game is good or bad or needs improvement. One thing I can tell you right now from the top of my bat is when it comes to membership, if you look closely, the login queue priority is still a thing. But like you mentioned, all these other rewards that you get benefits over time, it's very interesting how that's no longer the case anymore. For example, if you're a membership for the first month, you get 25% more certs every day. And if you get the second month, increases slowly over time. Another interesting concept I think that got dropped over time. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And I'm glad I got Angry Joe's video here just to give you guys a little bit of detail on how much things have changed. Very.
Yes, the Angry Joe army. That was a fantastic outfit full of his fans. They were so much fun.
I don't know how long. I don't know how long. I don't know how much of the game he did back in the day. I think he maybe, if I had to hazard a guess, maybe a year or two. Then he moved on to other games. But I'm glad he took a look at this game back in its heyday.
Oh, certainly.
So, yeah, you got your typical classes, still the same to this day. And apparently the voice servers back then were not very good. That's what he said in this video. I can only imagine how much things have changed. Now, does anybody know in detail how the territory control worked back then? Because if you look at the map here, it's very different compared to what it is today. Today, it's more streamlined, to say the least.
Well, you will notice a lack of lattice lines, eh?
There is no lattice line. You're correct. Does anybody here care to explain how the territory control worked back then? Because I don't think a lot of players here know how different this system was back then. Does anybody here know?
Gentlemen, no? Well, I don't want to keep the podium from you guys.
Hey, everyone is welcome to join. If anyone has any idea or information, you guys are more than welcome to join us. But we can probably leave that question open-ended.
I could chime in just a tiny bit, but I gotta get going myself here in about 2 minutes. I know back in the day before there was a lattice line, pretty much if you had a territory, it went off the hex system, you could attack any base or hex that was touching that hex. So you could go anywhere, basically, as long as you were touching the neighboring hex field for the next base.
I have to agree. That's how the system worked back then, because I'm looking at Angry Joe's review on the footage he used, and there is one portion of the video where you can see left and right side of the screen where the territory control looks very different. It's very different to what you see nowadays. I'm just trying to load it up. No, I don't want to eat yogurt. Go Canadian Harvest. No.
Anyway, I'll use this as my opportunity to step out. I appreciate you having
No,
me.
no worries, Mike Zat. We're about to wrap this up here shortly. And you know what? Mike Zat? Thank you so much for coming. We were just about to talk about the dev letter that the developers dropped today. We were just about to get to that.
It's been a pleasure, Mike. I hope to see you around.
Yeah,
So,
anyway, Mike Zat, I'm not going to take any of your time, Mike Zat. Thank you so much for coming in, Mike Zat, and have a wonderful night. So Sarlo and Dexis, since you two are still here, we're going to touch upon a dev letter here shortly. I just want to touch upon this territory control just for one little bit here.
Like the Surf and Storm letter that got dropped today, right?
Say again?
You mean the Surf and Storm that got dropped today?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit here. I just want to touch upon this territory control. That's the only thing that comes into my mind before we're going to move on to our last point, which is a dev letter. The leaderboard is still in the game. I just want to go to this one portion of the video that shows you how different the territory control was. Thank you so much for coming in, Mike Zat. Thank you so much. Oh, here's the portion I want to show you. Look at the portions of the map. There's all TR in this one map. TR dominated Indar completely, and look at the portions of the map. Look at the portions of the map that the other factions have. That's something you don't see nowadays.
No, you do. It's called Ocean.
Oh, shots fired, yes. Well, so here's another interesting observation. Back then, alerts were not a thing yet, so Planetside existed in perpetuum. My apologies. These words are pushing my limits. But without alerts and without continents being locked, combat just went in the favor of the strongest at the time. This means that today, if you remember, in your squad leader yourself, you know that outside of an alert, it's the Wild West. Anything can really happen. Fights can take place right next to your warp gate. But as an alert happens, and as the population stabilizes across all three factions and people get together, the map reaches an equilibrium of 33 versus 33 versus 33.
Right.
But without an alert even taking place, there was no such need for an equilibrium, and it was all depending on which outfits were online at the time and how seriously were they taking themselves. But I will say that having no lattice lines meant that tactics such as leapfrogging from one base to the other in order to cut off the enemy were a lot easier to achieve, yes.
Oh, Learner is here. How many VS and NC died today? You tell us, Mr. Learner. We are currently basically talking about the game's history. I hope it was the VS that died the most. I hope it was.
Yeah, also, you jumping into a depth letter is way too fast, buddy. We have a lot of things we can cover.
Like what?
Like, what was gaining escalation, the update? I believe that was the biggest one, right?
Yeah, that was one of the big ones. I was gonna move on to the last point, but we can probably talk about that briefly. And there was the escalation, Shadow Warp Gate, and Armory. Let's talk about those briefly for a bit. Shadow Warp Gate was probably the first. No, I think it was Escalation that came out first. Then it was the Shadow Warp Gate. Then it was the Armory. Is that right?
You are quite correct. No, wait. The escalation update brought Bastions, the Outfit Armory, and later on, Outfit Wars. Yes, the Shadow Warp Gate arrived later that year. Yes.
And it broke Samir. But before that, Hassan.
Hassan came out. Very good continent. Yeah. Oh, let's talk about that. So Hassan was one of the major updates that came out. Sorry, we're back on track finally. Sorry about that, guys. We are struggling to. Let's be honest here, guys. Today, this whole podcast today, we are currently winging it right now. We try to get as many people as we could to talk about this game. Honestly, for Planetside 1, we got very lucky with Bishop. He explained that game very well from beginning to end. Very well. And for Planetside 2, however, it's a bit of a mess. That kind of describes Planetside 2 right now, in a way. It's a bit of a mess. But a good mess.
So yeah, before we jump into the Hassan area, somebody wants to talk something about before Hassan came up.
Sarlo, you were the one who wanted to talk about that, or does anybody else want to chime in for this? Because I know there's the Hassan update that came out. Then later on, we got
came out quite early, so there is really nothing that is as substantial as Hassan.
All I can tell you is that Planetside 2 Hassan was completely different back then. The graphics were very different back then. There was more. It looked more atmospheric with all the haze. Like this photo here, for example, when it got first revealed, you don't see that. You don't see this much of it nowadays. It got downgraded.
I do believe you can do it, but you have to tweak your settings for it. For example, many people turn off their fog shadows on their settings because people tell them, yeah, you'll get better performance if you take it off. However, if you leave fog shadows on, Hassan looks slightly different, and it's a lot more manageable. It helps you see silhouettes in the distance.
This is definitely early Hassan. After Hassan came out, Shadow Warp Gate came in. Not Shadow Warp Gate, Escalation, I believe, came first because of the Bastions. And it also brought in the outfit resources. And I could log in game right now just to show you what that looks like. I could.
Yes, the continents did get makeover. Every so often, Indars got their improvements, but it was really quite shocking that after Hassan, which also saw a population decline shortly after, there were no resources to create a whole new continent, which was quite unfortunate, yes.
I'm just gonna quickly log in game just to show how much things have changed. And what I can tell you though is there was escalation, which brought in the outfit resources. Overall, escalation was a rough update to say the least. The Bastion, the fleet carrier had a lot of issues they had to fix before it got released live. But overall, it was a good update. Some people didn't like it, but overall, I think it was a good update. After that was the Shattered Warp Gate, where they completely reworked Esamir to what you see now. It's
3 times.
3 times. Speaking of that, let me look up a quick photo of Esamir, what the old map looked like. Here's an interesting photo. This is the old Esamir looked like this. There was an eastern warp gate on the top right corner, and the bases on the bottom were completely different. I don't know how many. I don't think there's an image of Indar over the years. This was the first I believe this was the first version of Esamir. Then, oh, actually, no. This is the earliest version of Esamir. This is pretty cool. So you got your warp gate, and the amount of territory you can fight in was completely different. Nice. It's really interesting to see how much things have changed.
Ah, yes, this screen is quite interesting. You will note the giant glowing deploy buttons over
Yes.
large battles. That got changed somewhat.
Yeah, I don't see this in the game anymore. That got removed. Here's the
quite
second
quickly.
version. This is the second version of Esamir. You couldn't go to the Shadow Warp Gate whatsoever. And you had to go around these Vidar observation sites. And then we
It wasn't the worst. It was, well, a lot of dead space, like you mentioned. Also on the bottom side of the map, it got cut down once the new update came up.
And finally, we have the third version where the containment sites came in. They did change the lattice lines recently, but this is more or less to what we see now in the live game. 3 different versions of Esamir. And how many versions of Indar do we have?
Oh goodness.
Let's do a Google search to see how much shows up.
Well, I will say that Indar received multiple smaller changes, so you're gonna have a difficult time finding images that would showcase all of them in chronological order.
Well, here's a Reddit picture of the history of Indar. You guys can look that up in your own time.
Well, do send us the link. I'm quite curious.
Lost and Outlook. This is interesting. I'm gonna quickly paste it for you guys in chat.
Why, thank you.
So we got Special Ops Training Camp. Never heard of it. Lost and Outlook. Red Ridge Communications. This is a very good Reddit post.
Oh, yes.
Leopard
this
Word
brings back memories.
Nursery. ARC Bioengineering. Plains of Death.
Wait. So you're telling me they can add more bases to Indar that they were already there? Yes, please.
Plains of Death.
Well, many of these you will recall the buildings still exist.
Some of these do.
Some.
This is a very good picture. Quartz Ridge Camp got changed a couple of times. Left one is an older version, and the right side is more or less what it is now. Wow.
Quartz Ridge, yes. I used to call it the butt crack of hell for a good reason. Oh, I have so many fun memories.
And there's this huge pillar, which I have never seen in game. There should be more anomalies in this game. Even if it's nothing much, it can be very interesting. The Nanite Pump Station, all in the corner. Wow. The salvage yard.
Yeah, this reminds me of a few interesting things. Oh, well, it says in the text that in the back of the warp gates were 3 tiny facilities that were not meant for combat, whose only purpose was to generate the 3 different types of resources that you had, the air, armor, and infantry resources, so that players had a constant supply even when no other bases were available.
Another thing I want to mention is, remember when Bishop was talking about the mechs that Planetside 1 had? I think
yes.
at some point they were going to bring it to Planetside 2, but it looks like they decided not to. Can you imagine seeing one of these things in action? That would be terrifying.
Well,
You
I
mean
can
your
tell you this, that many players ventured to this Holy Land to see this beautiful monstrosity, and many napkins were used when looking at it for wiping away your tears, of course. Of course, of course.
and the crown, very different in 2013. There was no underground tunnels that I know of, and there's so many in the old biolabs. Sarlo only provided a photo of what the biolabs looked like back then. Oh no, these are not Omega Max suits, Evil Genius. These are things that carried over to Planetside 1, but never fully implemented. No, the Max has no chance against this thing. No. The Maxes don't stand a chance against that thing.
Yeah, maybe several maxes with the anti-vehicle weapons could maybe do something?
Again, you guys can look at this photo in your own time, or I provided the link on the chat. But it's very interesting that this one person decided to list some of the changes. For example, black shirt iridium. That's no longer a thing. They got removed for one reason or another. There were more. What's not listed about the crown was how it have 4 control points. I remember that. And then it got changed back and forth a couple of times for whatever reason. And let's not forget TI alloys. How many times that got turned off and on and changed.
I mean, that's our own fault. We nuked it too many times.
Oh, and the rock cliff. Remember the rock bridge? That's
We
no
also
longer
nuked
there.
it too many times.
The rock bridge is no longer there at TI alloys anymore.
Thomas Arlo, how many times did you nuke those places yourself?
Which one specifically?
TI alloys?
Honestly, I did not.
What
Not
about the
even
bridge?
once. Not
What ab-
even once.
What about the bridge?
Not even once. I'm not kidding. Me and my
Wow.
boys made an effort to avoid the alloys for a pompous that it was, and we keep a strict armory plan in Oryx. So armory assets are not wasted for memes.
Let's visit one of the continents that has no queue. Let's go to Ezimir.
I'm guilty. I think I nuked the TI alloys like 2 times before I got removed and the bridge. I never did. I was starting to nuke stuff because I had the construction building.
Oh yes, oh yes. Those actually produce a much larger explosion than regular pocket orbital. In armory orbitals, quite fun.
Here's a quick comparison of what the warp gates look like right now live. Everything's maxed out. And even I noticed that the game's graphics definitely got downgraded over time. Everything has been
Yes.
downgraded just to improve performance, and I think that's for the better.
Well,
Even the
it is
northern-
downgraded. I find it regrettable that more things are not added into the warp gates. I mean, this warp gate that you're looking at right now, the exact model is completely unchanged. This is how it always was. The indoor warp gates are the only ones that differ in this actually, and of course the new Esimir one.
And the skybox is definitely different. It definitely doesn't look like high resolution at all. The Hassan warp gates. Oh, that's a
yes,
good
custom
point.
Warp gates did have some firing ranges on their sides, but the warp gate building itself is quite identical.
And
You mean
one
the-
go
The
ahead.
3 pillars going up with the big bubble surrounding it all?
I wasn't around for that. All I know is that I only been paying attention to the update that came out after 2019. So it's very interesting to know how much the game has had these changes over the years. Hassan warp gates. Let's take a look at the Hassan warp gate. Let's see if there's any photos of it back then.
Well, they did receive a few more buildings on the outskirts, such as a shooting range, but that was pretty much it, unfortunately. But a welcome addition, I must say. One of
I
the
don't.
most interesting things that you must note is how did the amount of bases on different maps change? If you were to remember Esamir was quite on par with all the other continents, but with time the amount of maps got reduced and the amount of lattice lines just as so, and the maps which remain are larger in nature, while Hosni on the other end remains highly splintered. Oh yes.
I think that's another fair point to say. Honestly, I wish I could have more information to share with you guys.
About the information about the bases disappearing, go look at the map you showed us. At the bottom, there is a tweet from one of the devs explaining why several of the bases got removed.
On the picture?
Yes, down at the bottom, there's like a few tweets.
Okay, Adam Clegg said this back in 2013, apparently. All of the level designers are in agreement. Putting outposts behind Warp Gate is a bad idea going forward. They'll be squashed.
And if you look at the map from Indoor that he mentioned, it's basically several bases along the edge of the warp kits that got removed.
Which part? Is it on the top part or the bottom?
Go any of the warp gates. Each of them had an outpost.
With the X's on them?
Except the northern one. If you go to the southwest one, it says there was a special building before the warp gate.
Southeast. There's the warp gate and southwest. You said southwest.
Southwest, east, southeast. Both of them had it.
I believe I see.
Arc Bioengineering and NS Salvage Yard at the northern warp gate were removed, and it shows the picture of where they were.
I believe. Okay. Paris Eastern Grove? No. Lost and Outlook? No. Scarred Bases Sky? No. Either way.
One more thing that the image does mention was the planes of death that I totally forgot to mention. You were actually able to go outside of the boundaries of the map without dying. There's an actual picture of it.
Yes, yeah, it's right here. Yeah, we got a picture of that. It's very interesting how you were able to be there without dying. It's too bad you can't go there anymore. That would have been a fun place. The total number of bases has only decreased. That is true. I'm only based on this one picture, and it definitely has gone down. But I think the game is a lot better that way. I think we covered just about everything as best we could. I don't want to waste any more of your guys' time. But basically, Escalation came out with the outfit resources. Outfit Wars, we could cover. We didn't talk about Outfit Wars just yet. But I can give you guys a short version of the Outfit Wars. Outfit Wars was a bracket style matches that were happening week after week after week. Short version, the Outfit Wars were not perfect. The first iteration of Outfit Wars definitely burnt out a couple of outfits that I know, B-Way included. And now they're finally bringing them back, which we're going to be talking to you guys here shortly. And what other stuff we could talk about? Outfit resources. They finally fixed up some of the issues, but there needs to be more incentive for people to do things in the game. There's missions that you guys can look up in game right now. Safety, it's basically something you can do like in Warframe, but I think that's just my short description for those things. And we're finally back. We're gonna cover the last thing on the list here today, which is the dev letter. That's gonna be part 3, and we're gonna be wrapping things up. I think honestly, this bit with Planetside 2 could have gone a little bit better, but I don't think we got a lot of people that know the history of Planetside 2 thoroughly. So we did the best we could.
I feel like we're jumping too many hoops.
Yeah, honestly, there's not much.
Each of the updates brought a huge wave of change to the game. Like, I don't remember the name of the person now, who mentioned like the game had a drought, right? And we were starting to get stuff. It was wonderful. Even though it was one update a year, like we had Escalation, and the next year we had the whole SMU stuff. It was still wonderful seeing the game be alive.
Exactly.
Is that this topic that we are undertaking today is so wide and varied that we could spend a long time talking about it.
Yeah, I have to agree. I have to agree, but I don't think we have enough people here can talk about it, especially me, to cover it thoroughly. But what I can tell you though is that some of the people in the audience have been very nice enough to give us some information there and there. And Escalation and Shutter Warpgate were both in the same year. 2 big updates in 1 year. That's really nice to see. And this was pre-pandemic as well. And even though it did not make the game grow substantially or exponentially, despite the developers' efforts, but I still love the fact that they went out of their way to put effort. I appreciate that. It gave us some new changes to the continents, which we all needed so badly, especially for a game this repetitive. And the funniest bases that got removed was in Amherst. Underground bases. Oh, let's look that up right now. Underground
Oh,
bases.
Electric Boogaloo.
Electric Boogaloo. Let's wait. Let me look it up right now. Amrish Underground Base. Let's look that
What
up
was
right
it
now.
called? Nanites something underground base. Do you remember, Sarlo?
I don't think I remember.
Subterranean analysis. Yes.
That's
So, gentlemen, are you perhaps familiar with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? On toast, of course.
I don't think so. And I just found
Does ring a
Subterranean.
bell?
I just found the base. Subterranean Nanite Analysis.
Well, let me ask you this, Inyo. Have you ever made a sandwich using toast that would utilize like 3 pieces of bread?
I don't think I have. How does that work?
Really? Oh, well, you're missing out on life, my friend. Well, essentially, imagine a very wonderful sandwich, but instead you add another layer of meat and cheese and add some bread on top of it. That is how Subterranean Nanite Analysis was. A tower of delicious meat and cheese separated by very narrow points. You know, a sandwich toast has also a few holes and some mayo drips out, which is quite annoying. And that is the problem that the bases faced. You had these wide, beautiful open areas with very narrow throats sprinkled every so often that would stifle the flow of combat. Overall, many found the sandwich to be quite delicious, but overall messy to use, and so instead we now went back to eating things with a fork and knife. That is how Subterranean Nanite Analysis felt.
The worst execution of base design. Honestly, Agartana, you got a point. When EG7 stepped in, they gave the development team the resources that they need. With a skeleton crew, no wonder why there were hardly any updates coming out year after year after year. A nightmare grind. Based on these photos, I can only imagine. Let's look up videos.
So, to put into perspective how bad it was, Enio, remember, people in the chat also did mention there's a PA you can play? Anyway, remember the biolabs when you could spawn inside of them?
Yeah.
Remember how many people were there, how many people died, and just, be and say, oh, I need to farm my directive, let me just go to the biolab, and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
The nanite subterranean system was that, but amplified.
Also, Dex, I'm just looking at some video footage of Subterranean Analysis fights, and this looks like hell. This looks like hell. Just holding on to this point. Lerner, you're talking about this base right now. And by that, but defending squad could drop a gal engineers onto the surface to fix the surface engineer shield and lock everyone inside. Oh boy.
Quite so, yes. But here you see tunnels, vertical tunnels, that were quite narrow, and with large open flat areas, those tunnels presented a difficulty to breach. And that's what made this literally akin to a blender, actually. If you
Killing
take a look
ground.
at its shape, yes. If you take a look at the vertical shape of the tunnel and the fact that people go through and get shot at, this is, in fact, a blender.
Shout out to Casual Rel for having this video for us.
Oh yeah, something that was similar to this. Do you guys remember when the Osher launched and we had to do the campaign mission and we had to go to the specific base underground that you had to drop through this long tunnel directly into water.
Yeah. Don't remind me,
People
Dex. Don't remind me,
and
Dex.
people camp that spot to oblivion.
Ah, yes.
Whoever owned the base owned the entire lattice. I can see that,
For
and the
minutes
fact
is
that
the
you can repair the generators so quickly, and you're forced to go through another long timer. That's just a nightmare waiting to happen.
yes.
The
So
nightmare was repair nades being able to repair destroyed generators. So when you had an amp station where the generators were a secondary objective that opens the doors, defenders could toss grenades from the safety of the tunnels or nearby to repair the generators, which set back the attackers for about 2.5 minutes
Yeah,
with
like right
a
here,
single
it's
guy.
difficult to breach. It's so difficult to breach. Even if you get a good group, it's just a nightmare just to get in. Nightmare.
which is also something that people have been contributing to containment sites since they appeared, because they were having PTSD from those, basically.
And this one, and you're in this, and you just do suppressing fire, and there's no way to breach. There's no strategy. Just endless grinding as soon as they come up. Just like that. Oh.
It's a numbers game at that point.
Yeah, it just depends. It's just the bragging rights of how many kills you get. I have to agree with Egerton said. At least containment sites has some strategy involved. If you don't have any strategy covering points with enough people, you're not going to capture that place. It's a way better than it's way better than what I see here. Much better. I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you this. I would rather play containment site than this base. I would rather play that base instead. If I had to choose, that is. If people will complain about containment sites, but I will defend that containment sites are a lot better than this base.
Oh, certainly. Well, I can guarantee you that containment sites are wonderful bases, and people that dislike simply haven't given them a chance. Like, I've spent about 6 to 12 hours creating a guide on containment sites that is incredibly detailed, and I can appreciate the intricacies. So all they have to do is spend 6 to 12 hours making a guide, and they will love it.
I mean, I just played there for like 2 hours and laid the layout, and I loved it as well.
And I'm just gonna leave it at that. Subterranean analysis, one of the biggest missteps that Planetside 2 had, to say the least. It's a big misstep, to say the least.
Well, that misstep is nuked now, so there you go.
I wonder where in the map where in part of the map was this? I wonder if there's an overview.
Eastern side of Emmerich, according to the records. I never had the displeasure of meeting it in person.
Yes, it was quite on the right side of Emmerich, quite separated from other lattice lines. So
Combined Arms
as
Initiative.
necessary.
Combined Arms Initiative. We already
Yeah.
talked about that earlier, correct? I think we already talked about that. I think.
I do not believe so, but it's such a wide topic that we shouldn't dive in it.
Well, learner. Well, learner, do you want to give us? Do you guys in the audience want to quickly give us a quick summary on the Combined Arms Initiative? I know there are some articles out there, but please feel free to give us a quick summary of what the Combined Arms Initiative was. I know we had a couple people here earlier. Right now, we only got Dexter, Sarlo, and Sherman, one of my moderators, in here with us. I wish there were more people that would have showed up in today's event. I did put up a notice 2 weeks ago, but some people came in at the last minute, and I think one of the people that we have that was supposed to show up is currently at work right now. But it looks like they're not home yet. But I'm gonna see if they will show up. But Combined Arms Initiative, definitely an interesting topic here. Let me look up Planetside 2 Combined Arms Initiative. That's another that I've heard that being mentioned a couple of times whenever I was running armed when I was doing platoons. What's the first thing that comes in with the Combined Arms Initiative? The time comp.
Yes, it was a fun process of rebalancing the game from a more slow armor heavy focus to giving infantry more tools to play with armor. But to be honest, that's all I can remember, simply because it happened quite early on, and with multiple balance passes, the essence has been quite muddled.
Hmm.
Don't
Di-
I didn't play much during that time,
no,
so
I
I
did
don't have
not play
much
either, but
information.
it was mentioned by Commander Sirius on a video. I haven't watched this video personally, but based on the comments, people definitely are making quite a bit of criticism on, for example, changing AI vehicle weapons to do less damage to infantry and more damage to tanks was good, and a couple other things. We could be here all day, but they basically nerfed rocket speed, nerfed everything all around, deadly against everything. Shouldn't take 10 rockets to kill a vehicle. That's what we're doing right now in the game. Now I notice why they definitely nerfed it. No what? Every time I do armor columns, whenever I do armor columns in game, we always dread light assaults or infiltrators because they can kill the vehicles so quickly, and it takes a lot more effort for armored players to kill anybody in the game. It's all about balance, and I think that is definitely still an issue in this game, and it's going to be hard to find a balance where everybody's going to be agreeing to something. I do know there was a couple of people from the Planetside 2 community that was going to join us with us tonight, but I'm not too sure if they'll be coming in time for this event tonight. But I think, but honestly, the highlight we have tonight is Planetside 1. Man, that was a very good bit. It was just me and Bishop, and I basically let Bishop talk all the way through that. That was beautiful. If you had a couple more people that can talk about the history of Planetside 2 in detail, this would be great. We're just basically winging this right now. This heavily affected this race as a single tech plant. Made update. Tech plants were considered incredibly valuable because if you
Yes.
want it.
The single technically was quite an interesting change, I must say. You know, many people actually wished for the tech plant in the middle of Esmir to, in fact, be the thing that explodes and create the shattered warp gate area, so it would get more playtime. But I do believe this current loadout is quite proper. Now, Enya, I do hate to be the
Yes?
guy that does this, but I'm gonna pass out of sleep deprivation in moments now.
Oh, you gotta go.
Well, no, I don't have to go, but I am going to pass out, so I don't think I have much of a choice in this matter.
Should I think it's fine. I think it's fair we can move on to the last bit we have tonight. We could be here all day talking about the controversy, some of the negative changes Planetside 2 had. But what I can definitely say overall in return is there are definitely certain areas that could be balanced more. But I think it's fair to say that I think the developers are going to be saving that for later on. Oh well, wait, Bishop, you're back. Wait a minute, Bishop, you're back. Do you want to join in the conversation with us, Bishop? We are still covering Planetside 2, and we were just about to go to our last part. Welcome back, Bishop. If you have nothing, if you guys in the audience have nothing else to add, that's noteworthy to mention about Planetside 2's history, we're going to move on to our last bit today, which is going to be talking about the dev letter. The dev letter, which is going to be part 3, is just speculation. But that's the only thing I can think of in return. Planetside 2 has a very long history that even I don't know at all, simply because it started in 2019. We already covered how much Amherst has changed. All the other content has changed. Escalation, Shutter Warp Gate. Oh, and the company EG7 that basically provided the funds necessary for the developers of Planetside 2 to not have a skeleton crew anymore. That's another interesting thing to mention.
Well,
And there were
that's
a
how
couple.
far back we go, yes.
There were also a couple of staff departures that happened as well in Planetside 2. For example, one of the executive producers left and moved on to other things. I believe I forgot what I forgot. There's a picture on Reddit with Rel and somebody else. I don't remember his name, but he also moved on to other things, and he works for Sony now. So there's been, and Andy left, yes, but the other guy. Not Andy, the other guy. I forgot his name. But he also moved on to other things. And Bishop, if you want to request to speak, just request to speak, and I'll drag you in. And oh, Sherman. Oh, Sherman.